Hello everyone, especially to Sir Tommy. This is the work of Group 5 and our topic is about the business ethics and these are the topics that we're going to discuss later. A. Business ethics, why does it matter? And B. Some ethical issues in business ethics. So these are the members and I'm Patrisha and B. Sanase and I will discuss the first part which is the business ethics, why does it matter and its moral features of business acts. Followed by Ms. Aliza Rojo, the continuation of the first part with her topic Objections to Business Ethics, Replies. And for the second part of the business ethics, which is the ethical issues, the first issue is about systemic issues. It will be discussed by Ms. Trisha Sarmiento. Next is the corporate issue with Ms. Aira Sarcilla, followed by Mr. Joshua Serrano for individual issues. So this chapter examines an area in applied ethics called business ethics. So business ethics, as Manuel Velasquez of 2014 defines it as a specialized study of moral right and wrong that focuses on business institutions, organizations, and activities. More particularly, it is a study of moral standards and how these apply to the social systems and organizations through which modern societies produce and distribute goods and services, and to the activities of the people who work within these organizations. And this chapter is divided into two parts. So the first part looks into the reason why business ethics, or the application of moral standards to the business activity, is both necessary and appropriate. And the second part examines some of the basic issues in business ethics. So when we say business ethics, it is also known as corporate or professional ethics. It is a form of applied ethics that utilizes ethical principles to examine moral or ethical problems which can arise within a business environment. Business ethics applied to all aspects of business conduct and outlines the norms and values that govern ethical actions and behavior of individuals in the business organization. Did you ever wonder why business ethics is important or why does it matter to our society? Business ethics will help you weigh the potential consequences of your business decisions, and it will teach you to make moral distinctions and avoid common fallacies that people often fall into when making decisions. And one of the peculiarities of business ethics as a discipline is that it is necessity and appropriateness are sometimes put into question. There are those who believe that ethics has no place or role in business. So to introduce the discipline, it is thus important to address this point. There are two ways of doing this. One is in a positive way, in which we simply state the reason why ethics is important in the practice of business. And the other is in a negative way, in which we respond to the objections of the application of ethics to business. So let's move on to moral features of business acts. Business, simply understood, refers to the human activity concerned with the making and selling goods and services for the sake of making a profit. It generally comes in three forms, which is the entrepreneurship, partnership, and corporation. Business is an integral part of human society for at least two reasons. First, it is the institution primarily responsible for creating wealth, which enables societies to function well in terms of achieving and maintaining economic stability and political autonomy, among others. And second, it is one of the most pervasive elements in society that, in one way or another, members find themselves involved in its activities and affected by them. They are, for instance, either employees or employers of a company, customers of a certain kind of business, or the audience for business commercials. As for its widespread effects, business influences our values and well-being, shapes social policies, and impacts the natural environment on a large scale. The important social role of business and its widespread effects are strong reasons for why we should be concerned about the morality of the business activity. But what makes it appropriate to subject this activity to moral evaluation is the fact that business acts have all the morally relevant features, foremost of which are as follows. First business acts can be done knowingly and freely in their agents, which is the businessman, corporate executives, company supervisor, and others, can be aware of the morality of these acts, either as morally good or bad, and can have a choice on whether or not to perform these acts. Consequently, these agents can be morally accountable for their acts. This a feature of business acts makes them appropriate objects of moral evaluation in terms of moral accountability, whether their agents deserve a moral blame or praise. For instance, a manager of a drug company who decided to continue selling a product despite being informed of its negative effects will be morally accountable for the injuries this product may cause. So in this first business act, here is you're the one who's going to decide whether you are going to perform those acts like the example scenarios, selling a product and you know its negative effect, but you still continue to sell it. I found this that sometimes they do this for some reasons, especially for financial. Second business acts can lead to serious human injuries, for instance, that cater to the destructive needs of humans, such as those selling illegal drugs and firearms, and will surely pave the way for the occurrence of serious human injuries. This specific characteristic of business acts subjects them to a moral evaluation using consequentialist moral standards, such as the utilitarian moral standard, which looks at the aggregate benefits and costs of action. So, the utilitarian moral standard is also the most common approach to moral reasoning used in business because of the way in which it accounts for costs and benefits. Third, business acts can violate moral rights, which makes them appropriate objects of moral evaluations using deontological moral standards. They can, for instance, be evaluated as morally good or bad on the basis of whether or not they use persons merely as a means to achieve greater profits. For example, a company that intentionally gives a false or misleading information in advertising its products violates the moral rights of consumers. Consumers in this regard are being used merely as means to satisfy the profit motive of the company. Discriminatory practices in the workplace, such as those involved in the processes of hiring, promotion, and determination of wages, are clear instances of violation of employee rights. Once Immanuel Kant says that deontological starts by acknowledging that actions and their outcomes are independent things. Basically, there are things you have to do even though you know they are wrong. Like for the example scenario, for the sake of their business, they intentionally give misleading information of advertising its product for the greater achieve of their company. But the consequences here is it violates the moral rights of the consumers, and for the company it is morally good because it gives benefits to their business. Fourth, business acts can result in unfair distribution of benefits like wages and burdens or like workload, which make them appropriate objects of moral evaluation using the moral standard of justice. Discriminatory practices in the workplace, in addition to violating rights, results in injustices as employees do not get what they deserve. For example, they do not get the wage increase or the promotion that they deserve in light of their contributions to the success of the company goals. So in its narrower sense, in this fourth business act, we use the moral standard of justice, and when we say justice, it is a fairness. It is action that pays a due regard to the proper interest of property and safety of one's fellow. While justice in the broader sense is often thought as transcendental, justice as fair is a more context-bound. Parties concerned with fairness typically strive to work out something comfortable and adopt procedures that resemble rules of a game. They work to ensure that people must receive their fair share or benefits and burdens and adhere to a system of fair play. And the fifth, business acts can lead to environmental damages. Most of those dumping their toxic waste into the rivers, polluting the air, extracting resources from nature on a large scale, and using animals for product testing are the big business institutions or the corporations. As Hope Bobcat in 2010 writes, there is a little question that industry continues to be a major contributor to the nation's pollutant loadings and environmental degradation. The sheer size and power of the larger multinational firms have made it difficult for government agencies to control their actions, and their public image is not good today. A not uncommon view of corporations is that they pollute our environment, so though such acts are subject to a moral evaluation using the moral principles and environmental ethics. So when we say environmental ethics, it is that nature has intrinsic value. This means that nature and its parts are not merely means for accomplishing one's purposes, but are ends in and for themselves. So this sounds simple enough, but it's actually quite a radical reversal of centuries of anthropocentric thought. For centuries, it was easy to believe that nature existed for human beings to exploit. The more trees we could cut down and convert into magnificent buildings, the better our quality of life. The more coal we could mine for fuel, the more energy we had available to power factories and produce more life-enhancing goods. And best of all, no matter how much we used, there was always plenty more available. But in recent decades, it's become clear that this is no longer true. As our economies have grown, our impact on the environment has grown to the point where we are depleting the available resources, causing the extinction of thousands of animal species and altering the climate of our planet. Many businesses, however, have continued to operate on the traditional model. Environmental ethics aims to question the basic assumptions that nature is there for our benefit. If nature has intrinsic value, how should that change the way your company uses energy or packages its products or treat animals? It can actually have a large implications for the way you do business. Despite these considerations that show the necessity and appropriateness of business ethics, some still find the relevance of business ethics controversial. This is mainly due to attain objections to business ethics. To secure the legitimacy of a business ethics, we need to show that these objections are mistaken.
Good day, everyone. Today I will discuss about the four main objections. First is the invisible hand argument. The invisible hand is a metaphor for the unseen forces that move the free market economy. Invisible hand is part of laissez-faire, meaning let do let go approach to the market. Through individual self-interest and freedom production and consumption, the best interests of society as a whole are fulfilled. Adam Smith introduced the concept in several of his writings, such as Economic Interpretation in his book An Inquiry into the Nature and Cause of the Wealth of Nations, published in 1776. The metaphor suggests two critical ideas. First, voluntary trades in free market produce unintentional and widespread benefits. Second, these benefits are greater than those of a regulated economy. One of the examples of the invisible hand is the cotillion described an isolated estate that was divided into competing lease farms. Independent entrepreneurs run each farm to maximize their production and returns. The successful farmer introduced better equipment and technique and brought to market only those goods for which consumers were willing to pay. He showed that returns were far when competing self-interests ran the estate rather than the previous landlord command economy. Second is the legal argument. Legal argument means argument on the jurisdiction of the director to hear the contested case, the constitutionality of a statute or rule, or the application of a director, and the application of court precedent to the fact of the particular contested case hearing. The five types of argument are therefore text, intent, precedent, tradition, and policy. First, argument from text. For better or worse, law has become a text-based discipline. There are authoritative legal texts, constitutions, statute, case judgment, and so on that set down legal rules. Consequently, one of the most common forms of legal argument is to identify case-relevant legal texts and then use them to figure out the relevant rule. This is the first type of legal enhanced framework, perhaps the starting point for the most legal argument. The next type of argument is the intent or purpose-based arguments. This is a subspecies of textual argument where, instead of looking at the plain meaning or objective meaning of a legal rule, you focus on the intent or purpose behind the rule. This type of argument is commonly used in contractual interpretation where the court figures out the meaning of a contractual terms by appealing back to the intention of the people who wrote it. Third is Presidential Argument. The common law system is famous for its use of case-based reasoning. Judges decide cases, and in doing so, they create rules that apply to those cases. Under the system of precedent, subsequent judges in subsequent cases have to follow the same rules if they think their cases are sufficiently similar to the older ones. The fourth type of argument is the argument from custom or tradition. This is an unusual one. We know as a matter of fact that societies follow rules even in the absence of the formal legal system. Hunter-gatherer bands, for example, have rules that members are expected to follow regarding the sharing of food and the treatment of others. These rules are rarely set down in an authoritative text. And the final type of argument is the policy-based argument. This is perhaps the most contentious type of argument. It involves advocating for the application of certain rules on the grounds that they are good policy, or conversely are going against the application of certain rules on the grounds that they are bad policy. This type of argument is controversial because some people think that lawyers and judges should not be engaged in policy making. But the practical reality is the policy-based argument widespread in law, and they are often critical in the most continuously case. Third is the morality argument. The argument states that all people have an instinctive sense of what is right and wrong. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. Objective moral values and duties do exist. Therefore, God exists. Without some objective reference point, we have no way of saying that something is really up or down. God's nature provides objective reference point for moral values. It's the standard against all action and decision of measured. But if there is no God, there is no objective reference point. And the last of the main objection is the immorality argument. A person or behavior that conscientiously goes against accepted moral, that is, the proper ideas and beliefs how to behave in a way that is considered right and good by the majority of people. Immoral connotes intent of evilness or wrongdoing, and it is a thorough antonym of moral. These acts include behavior such as murder, sexual assault, and robbery. A significant portion of criminal laws is also immoral. Most of us can agree that some acts should always be criminal. Example, execution, murder, forcible rape, or robbery. We have two basic types of immorality. First is wickedness, second is moral weakness.
Good day everyone, my name is Trisha Sarmiento and I will be discussing some ethical issues in business. As the activity of making and selling goods or services for a profit, the idea of business may seem to be simple. So, kung iisipin natin is parang napakadali lang mag-manage ng business. Subalit, ito ay may mga kinakaharap din ng mga ethical issues kung saan compliance and governance that is consistent with the organization's core values. So, minsan kasi, yung nakakasakop sa ating business, kung saan lugar tayo nagtayo ng business, is meron silang mga parang core values na sinusunod. And isa yon sa mga pwedeng makaapekto sa pag-manage natin ng business. So the first ethical issues is systematic issues. It is concerned the economic, social, and political system within the business operates. It includes questions about the morality of capitalism or of the laws, regulation, industrial structure, and social practices within which business operates. So, kagaya nga nung sinabi ko kanina, minsan ang nakaka-apekto sa ating business is kung saang lugar natin ito itinayo. Dahil pwedeng maaaring maka-apekto dito yung mga laws and regulation na ating sinusunod sa lugar kung saan natin inilagay yung ating business. So the next topic is morality of capitalism. The business practices morally evaluated in business ethics are usually those done in a free market systems or capitalist economic system. Capitalism is generally characterized by minimal government control over the operations of business. It contrasts with the socialist or command system where there is greater governmental control over this operation. So, sinasabi dito na capitalism is more moral, unlike socialism, because capitalism respects individuals their rights, and their pursuit of happiness. In fact, capitalism requires disrespect for individuals and rights. This is why capitalism often defined as social system, not an economic system. So the next is doing business in global economy. A multinational for transitional company or corporation is a big company operating in more than one country at the same time. Given the laws, social, cultural practices, and economics conditions of the home country are usually different from those of the host country. So, pagdating sa business, merong mga international business kung saan ito ay may mga branches hindi lang sa isang bansa, kundi sa mas marami pang bansa. However, kahit na ganon, kung saang bansa naroroon yung business is nagkakaiba-iba pa din yung laws and regulations na sinusunod ng mga branches na yon or ng mga host country. Unlike doon sa law na sinusunod kung saan nagmula yung business or kung saan yung headquarters nila.
Corporate issues is a questions about the morality of the activities, policies, practices, or organizational structure of an individual company taken as a whole. Now let us examine issues arising from the moral status of corporations and from corporate dealings with the various sectors of society. First is the corporate moral responsibilities. Corporations' actions seriously impact the well-being of individual society members, the good of society as a whole, and the natural environmental condition. Dahil dito sa impact ng corporation arises the question of whether corporations are moral person or moral agent more specifically. Regarding to deals in this question, there are two views that seem contradicting to each other, the individualist or traditionalist view and collectivist or corporativist view. According to individualist view, the corporations are nothing more than mere creatures of the law and as such can only be person in the legal sense. In this view, corporations have no moral obligations above their legal duties arises. Sa halip, the persons in this is responsible for corporate decisions, mean to say that individuals is the one have moral responsibility. On the other hand, according to collectivist view, the corporations are also moral persons in that they literally have moral rights and duties. In this view, the corporation is pwedeng maging moral agents kapag their decisions are in conflict in some of their individual members. Sa ganitong process daw, the corporation is nag-a-acquire ng sarili niyang identity dahil ito ay decision na ng majority under the process. Second is advertising. Ang business advertising ay may dual function to inform the consumer kung ano ang available products in the market and to persuade consumer to buy certain products. However, business advertising are considered unethical when they are manipulative. For being so, they undermine human autonomy or the capacity to make free and informed decisions. Ang business ads ay lumalabag sa kapasidad ng tao o consumer to make free and informed decisions kapag ito ay nagiging dahilan para ang consumer ay bumili ng certain products na sa paraang hindi malaya at makatiwiran or being manipulated in the manner that they have not voluntarily and rationally consented to. The manipulation influences consumers upang magdesisyon not in their best interest. Next is discrimination. There can be many characteristics of person that can be the basis of discrimination at mayroon din iba't ibang uri ang diskriminasyon. The most common forms involve gender, race, age, sexual orientation or preference, religion, and physical features. Furthermore, a discriminatory act may be isolated and institutionalized. It is isolated when the act is done by a single individual. On the other hand, it is institutionalized when the act is done by an institutionalized group such as corporation. Kapag ang employer engaged discriminatory act against some employees in applying the standard and procedures ng company, it is institutionalized. Pero pag ito ay own personal prejudice o pinsala ng walang kinalaman ang company's procedure, it is isolated. Next is employee privacy. In the context of the workplace, the right to privacy refers to the right of employees to determine the type and extent of information that their company can know about them. Itong karapatan na ito ay intended sa employees para makontrol ang information tungkol sa kanilang sarili that their company seek from them. And last, the anti-competitive practices of corporation. Some of the unethical practices that the corporation may engage consist of the so-called anti-competitive practices. They are anti-competitive in a sense that they go against the spirit of perfect competition. As a perfect competition, to the point of equilibrium, results in fair prices of goods, maximize overall utility, and respect the rights of buyer and seller. Excuse me. Itong mga anti-competitive practices na ito are precisely unethical dahil they lead to the opposite of the results of perfect competition.